All right, we are on air. It is May 18th, and we are very excited because this is our first meeting after the release of Backdrop 1.7. This meeting is to talk about community outreach for Backdrop CMS. On our agenda today, we are specifically talking about how to spread the word about Backdrop. Jeff made a really great recommendation that we should send an announcement to Katie, who's in charge of the PHP weekly announcement page, notifying the PHP community that Backdrop just had a new release. So I've gone ahead and done that. So hopefully that'll appear in next week's Backdrop Weekly. And I've also added that as a task to our post-release items so that every time we do a minor release, we can notify the larger PHP community that Backdrop just had a new release, which I think is generally a good idea. This week's PHP Weekly also included an announcement about a beta of WordPress. So I think that might, I don't know who reads the weekly, but I think that might kind of hit our audience if it's a bunch of people who are interested in WordPress. It also included information about like a new version of PHP 7.1.4 or something. So we'll see. That could be useful. We're also working on the newsletter right now. We have a draft, Tom. Oh, Tom, thank goodness you're here. Okay. So I wrote a blog post, and this is like a problem I had with all of my English papers in high school and college, is that I want to say what I want to say, but I don't want to say it 3 times. So there's no introduction and there's no conclusion. It's just kind of like, here's a bunch of stuff. And I would love it if that blog post had a little more like light and love in it rather than just like fact dump. So if you have any recommendations on how to make that read more like a blog post and less like a bullet list, that would be fantastic. And then we also want to take that content and use it for the newsletter. So if there's anything in there that you think needs to be reframed for that audience or whatever, I'd like that feedback too. We have a draft of a newsletter ready that I think has been ready for about a week or so, but it was the old one that was supposed to go out before Backdrop 1.7 was released, that highlighted the state of contributed modules for Backdrop. And I think that it's more important that the next newsletter we send now be about Backdrop 1.7. So I was going to recommend that we just take that other newsletter that was a little light on content and just take the paragraph about contrib and kind of put it in the next newsletter as well. So I think that for now, the focus should be writing the content for 1.7, and we can start by fixing the blog post. However, we can do that.
Okay. Where do you want me to put the suggestions? Do you want me to just shoot them to you directly, or?
Well, so whatever you think is best. We could start a Google Doc that like contains the current content. You could also just edit that node and create a new revision if you wanted to do that on the site itself. Okay. That would be fine. Okay. I think we have revisions, but yeah. So we should figure that out. And then, yeah, we have a bunch of other stuff. So that's newsletter territory. We have kind of some ideas and just need to put it together. We have an open Jira ticket with the Facet Interactive folks who are helping us with marketing. I asked in there how we can repurpose the content we have, the blog post and the previous newsletter into the next newsletter. So we'll hopefully get some movement on that. And then I'm imagining it'll be 2 weeks from the release of 1.7 before we cut a bug fix release, push the tag to Pantheon, and send the newsletter. Last time we said that, it ended up being more like a month, and I think that we shouldn't wait that long. I think that, you know, when Backdrop has been out for a month, it's really no longer news, the latest version. So I think if we don't have any bug fix releases that need to go out in the first 2 weeks, maybe we should just push the tag to Pantheon and send the newsletter anyway, just so that people kind of can know what's going on in a reasonable amount of time. So Nate seems to be nodding. We'll talk about that again at the dev meeting and see what people think with a larger audience. Okay, so that's newsletter. Blog posts. We have a bunch of great stuff that's going on right now with Backdrop and CiviCRM. And CiviCon happened 2 weeks ago, I think. So I would love to get some feedback from either some people who are at CiviCon or some people who are working on CiviCRM and Backdrop and try and make a little bit more of a splash about that. So I reached out to Herb Duell. He just pinged me. That was that noise on Gitter. Which I think we can work on getting him to write a blog post or, whatever he wants to do to make that great, because he's the one who's been doing all of the work on it already. So however he wants to help, we would love to see that. And I also reached out to Jack, who I knew was at CiviCon. I know they're really busy and don't have any time. But it would be great to get an idea of if there is someone who maybe has some time to do a write-up on that, and just what else is going on in the world of CiviCRM, and if that relates to Backdrop, that would be great too. So I've got some kind of follow-up issues there. There's a lot of news. We just need to figure out what we can share, how to do it. Nate, you also added a note here. I think I put this in last week's developer meeting too. But for those of you who are watching this meeting, we have a fantastic, active, recent a new person in the Backdrop community, or at least newly active, named Jonathan Daggerhart, who wrote this fantastic blog post that was talking about WordPress, Drupal, and Backdrop and how it all kind of fits together. Which is really great. My favorite thing about that blog post is that it's super positive about Drupal too. So it's like, he totally gets it. He's like, I love all these things and this is where they all fit together. And I would just recommend, if anyone is curious about that blog post, daggerhart.com is his blog. So it would be great to read that, share it. It's a fantastic article. The next event that's coming up for Backdrop interested people is Drupal Camp Montreal, which is up in Canada in June. And Nate and I are going to be there. We're going to be doing a talk. We'll probably also be doing a training. We haven't figured out scheduling around that yet. Yeah, if you're interested about other events having to do with Backdrop, you can check out our calendar, backdropcms.org/events. If you have an event, you want people to come there and talk about Backdrop, anyone who has an account on backdropcms.org can post the event there. They're moderated. We check at least once a week, usually more, but we want to make sure there aren't any jokers out there. And then let's see, other ideas. Nate, do you want to jump in on these since you're adding?
Yeah, I totally sprung this on the.
Yeah. Go ahead.
It just occurred to me. So over the past 2 weeks, over in the world of Drupal, there's been some discussion about evolving the processes and governance within the Drupal community. And so this is an unusual opportunity because it derives from a lot of drama that has happened in the Drupal community. But now there's this upswelling of efforts to restructure the way that Drupal is managed as a project. And unfortunately, the last community discussion is today. And so I doubt by the time anybody watches this, that they would have the opportunity to actually participate in those meetings. However, there may be more discussions that come, this is just the first round, more discussions that follow up after this. And the reason that this relates to Backdrop is that every single time we go and talk about Backdrop, we have to, in some minor way, touch on why Backdrop exists and how it is different from the Drupal project. And it would be very, very beneficial for us if, as a result of this, if the Drupal community defines what its own values are and the direction of its own project, because it would make it so that we would have a point of reference for comparison, so that we can point at our values and say this is what Backdrop is, and we can point at the Drupal values and say this is what Drupal is. And that's been really difficult every time that we've spoken, because Drupal right now has got really nebulous values and really nebulous audience and mission and where they're going, who they're for. Drupal is for everybody, and I feel like that is changing within the Drupal community. It clearly changed a long time ago, and that's why we have Backdrop in the first place. But the actual official written down processes, documentation, and message about the mission of Drupal and the direction of Drupal is basically up for reevaluation right now. And I think that that's going to be a great opportunity to make it so that Drupal gets the clarity that previously it may have been lacking and ended up burning people so badly, such as ourselves. So anyway, just to call out to people that may be interested, that this would be a beneficial thing for Drupal to have this definition and to prevent the kind of burnout that we saw in the past. And it would also be really beneficial because it will make comparisons for us much easier if these processes get clarified a bit. So that's all I really had to add, that there's an opportunity right now that hasn't come along in a long time, and that's participating in it can really shape the direction of Drupal. Maybe not shape the direction of Drupal, but shape the definition of Drupal. That's it.
Yay. Sorry, I was muted.
Yeah.
I think that's great. Is there anything else that you guys want to talk about related to community outreach today?
Not really.
Okay. Well, I think I've got some work to do on newsletter stuff. Tom, if you could help me out with figuring out how to make that blog post better, that'd be fantastic. And then, yeah, we will reconvene in half an hour for the weekly developer check-in.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. Thank you. Bye, everybody.